He's self-sufficient. We don't need the clerks anymore. We got this.
Oh,
Order.
don't say that. I take that back.
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 12 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 108, the committee is meeting today on Report 13th, Health and Safety of Agricultural Temporary Foreign Workers in Canada during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Compte tenu
Given the directive of the Board of Internal Economy of the 10th of March 2020, all of those that are participating in person must wear a mask except for members when they are sitting during parliamentary deliberations. To have a good meeting, I would like to give you certain instructions for witnesses as well as members. Before speaking, wait for me to name you. If you're participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and you put yourself on mute when you're not speaking.
on Zooms, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Pour les députés présents dans la salle.
For members in the room, if you want to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk of the committee and myself will do our best to maintain the order of speaking, and we would like to thank you for your patience and your understanding in this respect.
In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection test in advance of the meeting. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada. David Norman, Principal. Department of Agriculture and Agri-Foods, Chris Forbes, Deputy Minister. Department of Employment and Social Development, Jean-François Tremblay, Sous-Ministre. Laurie McDonald, Senior Associate Deputy Minister, Employment and Social Development and Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada. Mary Crescenzi, Assistant Deputy Minister, Integrity Services Branch, Service Canada. Nisa Tamand, Assistant Deputy Minister, Program Operations Branch, Service Canada. Brian Hickey, Director General, Temporary Foreign Workers Program, Skills and Employment Branch, ESDC. Witnesses will have 5 minutes to make their opening statements, but before I proceed, I'm just going to recognize Mr. Lawrence. I see you have your hands up, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, and I apologize to the witnesses. I'm hopeful this won't take long. I just would like to put 3 motions on notice, and prior to tabling, they will be available in both official languages, and I'll just read them into the record if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
No, I don't think.
Point of order, Chair. In respect with to the witness that we have right now on the floor, I'm not aware that committee business or motions are part of that agenda. So I wonder if we can have the witness and do our questions first and have this at the end as committee business.
Let me just confer with the clerk. My belief is Mr. Lawrence is going to be very brief here, so just hold on 1 second, please. I'm just going to suspend the meeting for 30 seconds. Mr. Lawrence has the floor. I'm going to allow him to simply read his 3 motions, I believe, into the record, and then we're going to move right away to the witnesses. He's not moving them today. There's no debate on them, and then I'm going to get right to the witnesses, and we'll address these at a later date.
Chair,
Mr. Lawrence.
Point of order, sir.
Yes.
If I could I just suggest, and it's a friendly suggestion, could we have that left to the end of the meeting? So that could we carve out some time, just because I know colleagues want to hear this testimony, and I think that, there's an opportunity. Certainly he would have the right to give notice, but I think it would be best, in my view at least, to do that at the end. Just a humble suggestion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Because I know he's going to be quick, I'm going to let Mr. Lawrence read it in. And just to get it done, I worry, I always try to get to the four rounds. And I believe if I get through this, I can do that. And I'm going to give Mr. Lawrence the floor to just read these in and get it done. Mr. Lawrence, the floor is yours.
I promise it'll be less than 2 minutes, Mr. Chair. So motion number one is whereas Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, IRCC, has failed to provide newcomers to Canada with timely responses to permanent residency applications and renewal, Afghan special immigration measures applications, work permits, citizenship applications, proof of citizenship, visitors visas, and electronic travel authorization, refugee and sponsorship, we call upon the Auditor General to commence a study on processing times within the IRCC. That is motion one. Motion two, whereas the government has continually failed to meet long-term drinking water advisory targets, and whereas the government has extended their initial target to eliminate all long-term drinking water advisories from March 2021 to March 2026, we call upon the Auditor General and the officials from the Indigenous Services Canada to appear at Standing Committee of Public Accounts within 60 calendar days and to provide an update on status of the lifting of long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations community. Number three, that the committee invites the Auditor General and officials from Public Service and Procurement to provide an update on the national shipbuilding strategy in Canada, given the international crisis in Ukraine and the associated impacts on Canada's Arctic sovereignty. And just a quick note, and then I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair. I'd prefer not to table these motions, and I would like to go by unanimity, and I look forward to talking to the chairs of the various parties and hopefully getting this done through unanimous consent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence, and that is all for another day. I'm now going to turn to Ms. Hogan. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much for your patience, and to all our witnesses, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on the health and safety of agricultural temporary foreign workers in Canada during the COVID-19 pandemic. The report was tabled in the House of Commons on December 9th, 2021. I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Joining me today is David Normand, who was the principal responsible for the audit. As part of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Canada amended the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations in April 2020 to place additional responsibilities on employers of temporary foreign workers to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to help protect workers' health and safety. The audit focused primarily on whether Employment and Social Development Canada conducted inspections to verify whether employers followed these new requirements. Canada's agricultural sector relies heavily on temporary foreign workers, who are an integral part of the workforce that supports our nation's food system. From the start of the pandemic in March 2020 to June 2021, more than 79,000 of these workers came to Canada. Overall, we found that Employment and Social Development Canada's inspections, whether they targeted quarantines, outbreaks, or basic accommodation requirements, did not show that employers were meeting requirements to protect the health and safety of agricultural temporary foreign workers. In 2020, 73% of the quarantine inspections we examined had significant problems with quality and rigor. Inspectors determined, without gathering sufficient evidence, that almost all employers were complying with COVID-19 requirements, or inspectors accepted information that flagged possible non-compliance, but they did not follow up. In December 2020, we informed the department of these alarming findings. We expected that the department take concrete action to improve its inspections, and we continued our audit through the 2021 growing season. Unfortunately, in 2021, the situation worsened. The rate of poor inspections rose to 88%. Timeliness was also a concern, with many quarantine inspections remaining incomplete and inactive long after workers' mandatory 14-day quarantines had ended. Notre audit sur les inspections en
Our audit of the department's inspections of outbreaks found similar delays and gaps in evidence gathering. The department could not show that employers provided sick or symptomatic workers with accommodations that allowed them to properly isolate. We found that about 60% of the outbreak inspections we examined lacked even the most fundamental supporting information, such as photos of workers' isolation spaces. This was also the case with the department's inspections of basic accommodation requirements, such as running water and occupancy levels. We found that 93% of these inspections had little to no information on workers' accommodations. Many temporary foreign workers depend on the accommodations provided by employers. This responsibility takes on even more importance in the pandemic context of social distancing and disinfection protocols, as accommodations are often shared. Before and during the pandemic, the department had committed to improving the living conditions for workers by developing minimum accommodation requirements in its temporary foreign worker program. However, we found that the department had done little to meet these commitments. Concerns about the living conditions of temporary foreign workers in the agricultural sector are not new. The COVID-19 pandemic has again underscored that Employment and Social Development Canada needs to prioritize the health and safety of temporary foreign workers and deal with accommodations that are overcrowded or otherwise inadequate. It is long past time to fix this situation for temporary foreign workers who come to Canada. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Now to Mr. Forbes, Deputy Minister, Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. You have 5 minutes as well, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the invitation to appear before the committee today to discuss the Auditor General's report on the health and safety of agricultural temporary foreign workers in Canada during the COVID-19 pandemic. As you all know, labor is a vital resource for Canadian farmers and food processors. Some 60% of all those in the temporary foreign worker program are employed in the agriculture and food sector. In the early days of the pandemic, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada launched 2 programs to provide financial support to employers to comply with the new federal health and safety measures for temporary foreign workers. The Mandatory Isolation Support for Temporary Foreign Workers program provided over $130 million to help farm employers, food processors, and fish harvesters across Canada to cover costs of compliance with the isolation protocols under the Quarantine Act.
Number of increased costs related to entry requirements of temporary foreign workers, and the program helped them offset some of those costs, including wages and benefits, accommodations, and transportation. Due to high demand and ongoing border measures, we increased funding to the program twice. And we added provisions for employers to cover hotel stays for workers who are unable to travel directly to their place of employment due to quarantine requirements. The program successfully assisted employers as they brought foreign workers to Canada to enable agriculture and food production to continue at a time where that was a great worry to all of us. The second program, the Emergency On-Farm Support Program Fund, provided federal provincial support of over $40 million to help more than 1,700 farm employers prevent and respond to the spread of COVID-19 within their workforce, including temporary foreign workers. This investment helped fund improvements to living quarters and workstations, PPE, sanitary stations, and other key measures. These upgrades helped to ensure farm employers were better ready to protect workers and reduce risk of transmission. Last year, these programs helped to facilitate the arrival of a record number of temporary foreign workers to farms across Canada. Looking ahead, Mr. Chair, we continue to work with ESDC and Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada on a number of improvements to the temporary foreign worker program. Certainly the goal is to improve worker health and safety and ease administrative burden for employers. As the report reminds us, temporary foreign workers are essential to Canada's agriculture sector, to our supply chain, and to our food security. Their skills and labor were key to the Canadian agriculture sector's resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we will certainly work together with our partners to strengthen our programs, to protect the health and safety of those workers, and keep our food supply chain strong. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Et maintenant, Jean-François Tremblay, vous avez 5 minutes.
Jean-François Tremblay, you have 5 minutes. Mr. Chair, I first would like to recognize that I'm speaking to you today of the Algonquin Nation in Canada. I would like to thank you for the invitation today to appear before the committee to discuss the report of the Auditor General. First, let me start by saying that Employment and Social Development Canada understands the importance of this audit and agrees with its recommendation.
By the department to completely rebuild the temporary foreign workers program's compliance regime. Please let me briefly provide an overview of this complex program and its purpose. Temporary foreign workers are a key source of labor, particularly in agriculture and agri-food, and ensuring the reliability entry of safe working conditions is key to continue the food security of Canadian and Canada's economic recovery. A critical aspect of the program is that it seeks to address labor and skill shortages while balancing the interests of Canadians, workers, employers, and the protection of the foreign workers. To that end, we have measures in place to mitigate potential impacts of the program on Canadians workers, such as downward pressure on wages and displacement of Canadians by temporary foreign workers. Monsieur le Président, les défis posés par la COVID-19.
Mr. Chairman, the challenges brought on by COVID-19 have been unprecedented, and its impact on the temporary foreign worker program cannot be overstated. As the pandemic hit, thousands of temporary foreign workers were scheduled to arrive in Canada. At a time of global uncertainty, the department was essentially put in a position of having to build and fly the plane at the same time. ESDC acted quickly to introduce the regulations and build a completely new virtual inspection regime that evolved amid changing public health directives and crisis conditions throughout the pandemic. The department also implemented new inspection operations to verify employer compliance with quarantine conditions. Also, we issued permanent bans on the most egregious cases of non-compliance. Despite our best efforts, the Auditor General's report made it apparent that there were fundamental flaws in a number of areas in ESDC's management of the program and in the design of the program itself. Chiefly, as the department rolled out its new inspection regime and doubled its inspection workforce from about 100 to 200 inspectors and continued to hire and train inspectors in preparation for the 2021 season, there was an undesired impact on workload. Simply put, the quality of the documentation of inspectors was not satisfactory to support the department's final decisions. ESDC owns these shortcomings, but with the delivery of any program, particularly during an unprecedented crisis, there are going to be risks. The issue wasn't the departmental staff and its senior leaderships weren't doing their jobs properly. It was that the given situation and the challenges of the pandemic, the program came up short in some areas.
In July, the department reviewed its strategies and measures such as training, guidance, and enhancements to inspection tools were put in place into effect. Additionally, ESDC's internal audit team conducted a review of 60 compliant inspection files completed in September through December 2021 and concluded that there is actually a 45% increase in files that met departmental inspection requirements since June 2021. And we continue to make positive progress as we prepare for the 2022 agricultural season. By the end of February 2022, the pre-pandemic inventory of inspection case active as the onset of the COVID-19 has been reduced by 92%. As part of our plan to ensure timely inspections, we have streamlined inspections and balanced inspections workload with departmental capacity. We are aiming for a rate of 90% of inspections filed without substantive errors by no later than September. Le ministère reconnaît également l'importance de pouvoir compter.
The department also recognizes the importance of well-trained inspection staff, and all staff responsible for inspections have taken supplementary training in February and March 2022. That is, in time for the 2020 agricultural seasons. Finally, we are working with the province's territories and key stakeholders to develop program changes that address the most immediate health and safety concerns in employer-provided accommodations. Our goal is to communicate these changes by the end of the year. Mr. Chairman, ESDC agrees with each of the Auditor General's recommendations. We are committed to completely rebuilding the Temporary Worker Forum Program compliance regime. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. We are happy now to take your questions. Thank you very much.
PACP, you have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Auditor General for your work and to the officials for your attendance today. I'm appreciative that the report reinforces that the agricultural temporary foreign workers are an integral part of the workforce that supports Canada's food system. Of course, the report documents grower concerns about delays in the audit process, and also those delays affected the grower compensation support programs. The report also validates grower concerns about the unmanageable volume of new guidances that they were expected to stay on top of, and indeed it provided a challenge for ESD inspectors as well. I would have wished that the report would more strongly acknowledge the existing oversight by municipal and provincial agencies, but overall it is scathing in its evaluation of the performance of the department. And so to the Auditor General, in numerous places, such as 1324 to 1329, evidence of poor documentation of audits is reported. In December 2020, you took a rather unusual step of actually meeting with the Deputy Minister and senior department officials to discuss the seriousness of these early audit findings regarding the quality. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I wanted to impress the urgency of the seriousness of the findings that we had found and asked the department to take immediate action to prioritize the health and safety of temporary foreign workers.
Thank you. And so to ESDC, you appear to have put a new quality control process in for completed audits since February 2021. This new process required a second review of inspection records, including quarantine records, to confirm the sufficient evidence had been gathered. So, and you did that before informing the employer of the inspection result. So several questions. What share of files go through this quality process? What's the service standard for it, for completing it? What are the timelines for advising the original inspector and ultimately the employer? And of course, the most important, why did the quality drop in 2021?
If you allow me, I will ask Mary to answer the question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to answer the following questions and perhaps describe that we had introduced a nationally quality regime in February that provided the national standard. Subsequently, in July, we moved that quality standard regime to the service delivery network so that it could be closest to the inspectors and could get just-in-time feedback in a much more timely way. This is showing tremendous progress to date. In some of the reviews that we have had, we are seeing that, as our deputy indicated, a 45% increase, but also our substantive errors since introducing a system enhancement this January. We are seeing higher than 90% without substantive errors.
So, excuse me for interrupting, but when are you reporting that back to the employers?
The employers, we proceed through a notice of preliminary findings and then a notice of final determinations before those pieces go forward. The quality review is conducted. We had started when we first introduced the national framework at 100% review. We have since then taken advice from quality experts and reduced that to the most pressing and most priority areas to 60% of our files.
Thank you. In response to the Auditor General's recommendation to re-examine your inspection systems and train and support inspectors, etc., You responded with a national steering committee plan in May of 2021. This was to develop an action plan to address those concerns. Industry has not seen it. Can you describe the plan and table a copy of that plan with this committee?
Mary.
I can. Thank you, Deputy. I would be pleased to share a copy of the plan. The plan looked at 4 to 5 major elements. One was in regards to training. The other was in regards to tools and procedures, system enhancements, communication, and of course, the quality and timeliness regimes. Thank
you. In response to the assessment of the backlogged inspections, the direction from the Auditor General was to balance those inspections with new ones taking place. You responded with a national workload strategy, and this was in 1372 paragraph. That will be a key tool to balance these two workloads. Is this strategy different from the action plan? And if so, can you also provide a copy and update to this committee?
And continue, Mary.
The National Workload Strategy is a supplemental document that was tied to the work of the National Steering Committee and the Action Plan. The National Workload Strategy was developed in July. What it looked at was the data and information that we had, as well as the capacity of our workforce, taking into account the recommendations from the OAG that we needed to look at our capacity and the ability to look at the areas of priority. In regards to the pre-COVID backlog, we're pleased to indicate that our workload strategy did reduce the pre-COVID backlog to 92%.
Thank you. My time is limited, so I'll take your assurance of tabling a plan. The report references 3 kinds of quarantine and post-quarantine audits, but ESDC also does audits that are non-pandemic related, risk-based audits and audits that preceded the pandemic. Were these inspection audits, particularly following COVID outbreaks around housing standards, and we'll get to that shortly, were they coordinated with local health authorities and local provincial authorities?
And I'm afraid I'm going to have to end it there. Mr. Epp will have to come back to that. I turn now to MP Shanahan. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, and je remercie tous les témoins qui sont ici avec.
I would like to thank all of the witnesses that are here with us today. And this is very important to look at this issue during the pandemic. But it's not an issue that dates from the pandemic. It's a long-standing issue. And just to start, I would like to ask some questions I think that Mr. Tremblay will be able to answer. If not right away, I think he could be able to provide information afterwards. Can you tell us how many temporary foreign workers come to Canada every year? How many are in the agricultural sector, and how many within that number of agricultural temporary workers go to Quebec? And so I would like to have the number also for the employers, especially comparing with Canada, the rest of Canada with Quebec. So are you able to answer those questions? So how many are now not compliant? With respect to the number of temporary foreign workers, we were at 125,000 in 2020, 127,000 for 2021, roughly 24,000 for 2022. For agriculture, we're talking about 5,000 in 2021, and the same thing, 5,000 for 2022, and it was 77,000. And for 21-22, we're at roughly 70,000. With respect to Quebec, I'm trying to look. I don't necessarily have memory for each of the provinces. I'm going to see if one of my colleagues might be able to answer you right away. We'll be able to provide this information. Thank you very much. Thank you for those numbers, and I can tell you that in Châteauguay and La Colle, and I have 6,000 temporary foreign workers who come each year. So this is a huge issue for us, and I know that the problems are a concern both for the employers as well as for those trying to protect the workers. And I have other questions for you with respect to for the producers in my riding. Inspectors, what type of training do they have? That is, are they trained? We know that 60% of the temporary foreign workers are in the agricultural sector. So are they trained, the inspectors, in the agricultural sector? Mary will explain a little more about the training of the inspectors. This is a very important question. We realize that you have to train them, and during the pandemic, we doubled the number of inspectors, and we did lose some also at the same time. So we were building the plane as when we were trying to fly it at the same time. So, Mary, can you
specific on the training?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for this question. In regards to training our new inspectors, it is initially a 4 to 6 a week program that covers what is involved in the inspection process, steps that need to be taken to ensure that the proper information is collected, the interconnections and working collaboratively with folks on the ground from other provinces, our provincial colleagues, as well as other migrant worker associations and employer associations.
I hate to interrupt witnesses, but what I want to know is if is there specific training for those inspectors that will be working in the agricultural sector. Because I'll give you some examples of whether it's a lack of training, whether it is confusion, whether it is lack of understanding of the mandates. But there are inspectors that are asking for documents that are no longer up to date. There are inspectors that are asking for documents that are found in other information that the farmer has already provided. There's incoherence in the response depending on who the employer is dealing with. There is, we have to deal with the challenge of between federal and provincial, but apparently over and above what we can understand due to the urgency of the COVID situation, there is not always a clear collaboration in providing directives. So is there training, or are there any plans for training specifically for the agricultural sector? Because that is where, and it was not in Quebec, c'était pas au Québec, c'était ailleurs.
It wasn't in Quebec, it was elsewhere in Canada where there were abuses and deaths.
I will respond by saying yes, there is specific training for the agricultural sector. Each of the streams have specific training in regards to the conditions that are associated to the agricultural employers. Every effort is made to work collaboratively across jurisdictions, but that's an area that we are strengthening and a part of the rebuild strategy. We've also introduced supplemental training in regards to collecting information on documentation, and it has been in regards to the agriculture specifically, as well as on the accommodation aspects.
Et merci beaucoup. Maintenant, c'est la députée.
Thank you very much. Now we have Madame Sinclair de Gagné. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to note we're very pleased to have Madame Hogan with us. And so I hope everything is going to be as positive for you as possible, despite the circumstances. So, with respect to the context, It was noted by Madame Shanahan and other colleagues that foreign temporary workers are a crucial part of our economy. We do all agree here that all parties say that we have a shortage of workers, and those temporary foreign workers are essential to our economy. On the other hand, these are human beings, and they may not be Canadian citizens, but they have the same human rights as anybody. I think everybody would agree on that. So if we base ourselves on that criterion, if we read a report where we hear that inspections were done in a, if you will, not a very good manner, and that the situation deteriorated in 2021, and that we know that there was problems already, and we know that there was more funding, federal funding that went into both the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and ESDC. We're in a context here where we've seen a constructive criticism, and I think it's absolutely necessary. In Quebec, we know that we receive roughly 1/4 of the temporary foreign workers, and if we look at the statistics, 73% of those workers, temporary foreign workers, are in the agricultural sector. And so we know that is a key sector. So what I would like to understand, and maybe this question would be best asked of Madame Hogan. First of all, I would like to know, first of all, are virtual inspections, as far as she knows, is that something that's done also in other departments? And if that is the case, is a virtual inspection, is it a process despite the fact that these are essential workers for our economy? So they have to work, but the inspections happen virtually. I'd like to hear a little bit more about this, about the efficiency of virtual inspections. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question. I think that I'll start by saying that we have regulations that are very clear. We can see that there have been clear changes to the regulation with respect to the safety for workers. Then there may be clear instructions, which is what we've seen here. The department had instructions for virtual inspections. Those were very clear, very detailed instructions. However, the efficiency of these inspections, it really depends on the implementation of all of the above, and that's where we've seen the problems. With respect to virtual inspections, as I said in other arenas, I've heard that yes, and seen that inspections continue in person in other areas. But we need to look at the basic issues. You have to have evidence upon which to base conclusions, and those have to be elements which support the conclusions, and that's not something that we saw in the files. And so I think that this we forget that technology could have helped with respect to virtual inspections. Okay, well, thank you. Could you give me examples of what you found in the report? Example? Well, it would be difficult to say when there's a lack of information, but if we look towards conclusions with respect to housing, accommodation, and whether it was enough to achieve physical distance, you would have to have beds that were separated by at least 6 feet. But when we looked at images, when you would see one bed in a bedroom, but there were other beds that you can't see in the picture. So it's hard to have the proper evidence. So, yes. So that type of thing would leave you with the idea that it was impossible to determine whether employers had actually protected the health and safety of workers, and whether or not the department can conclude that that was done. So first of all, there were cases where the health and safety of workers was not achieved, but also from your study, what we can see is that the department was saying that this was compliant, although there was no proof. That's quite right. You're right on that. You have 1 minute. Another minute. Perfect. Thank you. So, maybe 45 seconds now. So continue on that you've said that there were many examples in the report that was well written and very detailed. But first of all, with respect to the health and safety of workers, it was not always guaranteed, but in certain cases, we've seen examples where the department concluded that measures were sufficient, whereas the proof given that the virtual inspections in the circumstances were under COVID really weren't enough, but that the photographs would be shown as proof, but they didn't show the compliance wherever it was shown as compliant within the report. You can confirm. Yes, I can confirm. And also I can tell you that in a virtual inspection, there can be interviews, and sometimes information during the interviews was ignored. So this is an element. This is something that can be done both in person. That can happen both in person or virtually. Well, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being present with us today. Nice to see the Auditor General here, and I know, of course, this is a report about labor, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how ironic it is that we have an auditor right now in the Office of the Auditor General. There's a strike happening, and we're talking about the conditions of labor here today. I wanted to point that out. This is deeply disappointing, this report. It's another sad chapter in our history. We got to level with this. This is extreme. Some of this report is damning. And I want to make sure that we understand how we talk about these issues. These are people's lives. We are talking about people, fathers, mothers, children who don't get to see their parents, and they come back sick or sometimes dead. That's what we're talking about here. And this is deeply troubling for me, and I have a very difficult time understanding how we can continue after so long. Some of this report states that there was investigations back as before the pandemic. These conditions were reported. December 2020 had notified the deputy minister and senior officials at ESDC that early audit findings had identified significant concern with the quarantine inspections. It's just, how do we expect this accountability framework that we have in our country to actually yield results when we've been doing this for how long? There was public accounts meetings on this in previous, and we have to find a way to resolve this. This is a serious issue, and I'm encouraged by Tremblay's comments related to massive reform. I think that's encouraging. I think we need massive reform. We need to understand that protection for labor is critical. If we're going to be a country that understands how labor works well, if we're going to be a country that values people, we have to understand that these folks deserve the basic protections, basic level protections. Something that this report clearly identifies as not being sufficient for the workers. I want to ask a question related to the OAG's report. There's a question on consequences for employers who did not comply with the Immigration and Refugees Protection regulations, including monetary penalties ranging from $1,000 to $1 million. My question is, how many employers were fined in 2020, 2021, and in what amount?
Just maybe the question's for who?
Maybe ESDC, or who's the one handing out these fines?
Sorry, I was losing my... I would ask if you allow me, Mary, to answer, because she's got the detail in terms of the amount of money and the numbers of employers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deputy, for the referral of the question. I'm pleased to report that every effort has been taken to address the non-compliance of our employers in this regard. Over the 2-year period, we have identified more than 330 employers that were in contravention, and it could range from anywhere from receiving a warning letter to a monetary penalty or a permanent ban. In total, there was more than $2 million of administrative monetary penalties that were administered, and the list of non-compliant employers can be found on the IRCC website. I'd also like to underscore at this time that part of the impact of wanting to ensure the health and safety of our temporary foreign workers is measured by how many employers we bring into compliance. That is one area that our system unfortunately doesn't outline and isn't quick to underscore. But we have improved and increased the percentage by 10% up to 30% of employers that we worked with during the course of the inspection because of the interaction with the inspector and our staff and saying that they were not meeting the requirements. They made adjustments and provided proof that they did. So we were pleased to see that at this time we had a 30% of our employers that were brought into compliance and therefore did not need to go through the monetary penalty or the consideration of a ban.
My second question is, the OAG found issues with the department's 2020 assessment of wage pay to quarantine temporary foreign workers. 32% of quarantine inspections contain insufficient information to assess wages. Does the department plan to verify the wages were actually paid during quarantine 2020 and 2021? And what does it plan to do better to verify this in 2022?
Mary?
Of course, that example is not an example that we're proud of, and this is an area that we have introduced a number of steps in order to address in regards to supplemental training, in regards to system enhancements to track those types of things, as well as ensuring that the system itself provides prompts and ensures that the documentation is there. We are, as I said before, the moving into compliance. Some of the examples that I have also are examples where the employer at first did not pay the worker during quarantine because they did not have a social insurance number. The inspector immediately told them that that was not a valid reason not to pay the employer, and subsequently the day after paid the worker and demonstrated that they brought them into compliance. These are also some examples that unfortunately didn't show up in the report. It's not to say that there isn't significant work and progress that needs to be made in order to get to a better place. But we are seeing in the last 6 months improvements both by way of documentation, quality, and timeliness of our inspections, and we hope that that will continue on into this new season.
I would add to this, Mr. Chair, if you allow me, is this is not just about the inspection. It's also making sure that the workers knows what their rights are and making sure that they have organization that they can work with. So if you will notice in 2021 budget, we also got funding to actually work more with community organizations to provide services to workers as soon as they arrive at the airport, as well as in the communities. We also open up a line, multilingual lines, I think it was in March last year, that people can call directly work and they can mention what the issues are and what they're facing. So inspections are as an important part of the compliance, but we need more than that. You need prevention too. So we also kind of have a lot of sessions with the private sectors, with the employers. More than 1,100 of them participated over the last year, which represent more than 200,000 employers, because some of this was of course organization.
Thank you. Pardon, merci beaucoup. I'm sure Mr. Desjardins will come back on this theme. Turning now to Mr. Duncan. I'm moving along. I do want to make sure we get our fourth round in so everyone has adequate time. Mr. Duncan, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you to our witnesses for being here today. And I want to echo what Mr. Epp said in his opening comments. The importance of this program is instrumental, I think, for our agri-food industry, and also I think the importance of getting this right for protecting vulnerable populations like temporary foreign workers. I want to focus on the accommodation for temporary foreign workers. Given multiple media reports and public outcries, and even a commitment by the department back in 2018 to address the lacking minimum standards for housing accommodations nationally, 2 years later, and during the midst of the pandemic, there were still multiple reports of troubling conditions. It's now been 4 years. Mr. Tremblay, through the chair to you, can the department name one single national standard that is now established for this program when it comes for accommodation standards for temporary foreign workers?
As I have said before, and we've said before, we are working now with provinces, and there's a report on what we have heard through engagement and consultation, trying to make sure that we have actually a solution to the accommodation situation. Not to forget that it's true. I know people don't like to hear that sometimes, but it is an area of provincial responsibility. They develop the standards on accommodation.
If I could just, in the interest of time, maybe to illustrate my point on this, I understand the need to partner with provinces and jurisdictions, but I mean, in 4 years, can you name the province that would be objecting to running drinking water in accommodations or electricity? I say this from a public accounts perspective, there's literally zero that's been done. There must be agreement on 3 or 4 bullet points that saying like items like that should be a guarantee. So where I'm going with this is, and I'll say this sometimes I'm bad with analogies, is the department trying to bite off more than it can chew over 4 years producing nothing? Is there not some basic minimum standards at a national level? Who's pushing back on basic things like that from actually putting them in place after 4 years?
I think what you see as a challenge is not necessarily that we will not agree on some key elements. I think that's a very fair point. What you see as an issue is if we go to inspect, we don't have the capacity to enforce. We can let and tell provinces what's going on. And after that, they have to check if the information is true. And after that, it's going on. So it's how do we react faster? So one thing that we've done, for example, over the last few months and weeks, actually, is to make sure that we have an escalation process for 24 to 48 hours, that when we know that a worker is at risk from a health and safety perspective, we take actions immediately. We don't wait to hear what's going to come out of those discussions.
So as a supplemental to that then, of the conversations with provinces and partners and jurisdictional issues, what is your time frame for producing a standard? Is there something that you're going to come back to? You can go back to our committee and say by X date, we will have this. Where are you at in terms of those conversations? Are you nearly there, something imminent, or are you still months or years away from having something?
We're months away. I would say end of the year is what we're aiming for.
Okay. And I just, through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps ask in our conversation and recommendations that we have that report tabled with us as soon as possible on that for that reason. Another thing I want to go to at the higher level is again, from a public accounts perspective and ourselves learning about enforcement of this. As the Auditor General had mentioned, it's rare from my limited experience here in the committee for her office to raise preliminary flags like this of the urgency of this. They did at the end of 2020. The situation actually got worse in 2021. So if a Canadian or an advocate for the temporary foreign worker program and an advocate for a quality, a dignity of temporary foreign workers and their conditions that they live in or work in, my question would be is you were told in the end of 2020 there was a problem. You said you were going to address it. It actually got worse in 2021. And here you are in 2022 telling us it's going to get better. Maybe perhaps a reflective question, but some specific details. What confidence can you give to people watching this and following this file that 2022 is actually going to produce something different after, respectfully, in the midst of the pandemic, in the height of when it was needed, it actually got worse instead of getting better?
First, I would say that when you look at what's happened in 2021, it's not that there was no action. It's the time it takes to actually implement those actions. In February, as it was mentioned before, we launched our National Internal Quality Review. We got 2 proposals in the budget that were funded to improve the capacity of the workers to work with community organizations, and also, of course, to actually hold accountable and have more inspections. We doubled the numbers of inspectors. We doubled the size of the team that was actually providing and helping and working with the inspectors to make sure that they were doing their job appropriately. We actually introduced pre-reading regulation last summer, precisely to also have enforce the accountability of the employers when things are not going well. There's a series of measures that were put in place. And if you look at our result actually changed over the year 2020, the year 2021. When we say that there is an improvement because our internal audit look at it, it's real. We said that we will aim at 80% for end of February or end of March. We are actually at more than 80%.
Et merci beaucoup, Monsieur Tremblay. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay. Let's now go to Member Bradford. You have 5 minutes.
And thank you, Auditor General, for this very, very important work and being here with us today in order to speak to it. And thank you to all of our witnesses. Obviously, there's a number of items of concern in this report. One of the things that stands out is I think a lot of the problems result from these virtual inspections. I think all of us can appreciate that cameras do lie, contrary to popular belief. the internet is full of all kinds of images that misconstrue things. So as I'm to understand it, it was up to the employers to provide your inspectors with photos that would demonstrate that they were meeting the requirements. And yet we find that in 93% of the cases, there were no photos of the general accommodation, and 60% of the cases, there were no photographs of the isolation spaces. So what I would like to know is why it was decided to do virtual inspections, and is that the case that's going to happen this year as well, given that there are a lot of, obviously, shortcomings with this particular process? Deputy Minister? Yes.
Yeah, I would start and ask Mary maybe to talk about this year. But what we've done is to follow the public health measures. So we didn't send people when there was actually a risk from a pandemic perspective. We also have to understand that bringing people in an organization that is actually quarantined is not a good way neither. We could have been also a risk of contamination on our side. So the decisions to proceed with virtual was not because we decided that we prefer virtual. It's really because we needed to respond to the context of the pandemic and the fact that it was in the middle of waves. Even in 2021, for example, if you think about February to April, we were back into a big waves in terms of the pandemic, with actually record in terms of people hospitalization. I think in April, I may turn to Mary for what we're doing this year.
Okay, so would it not have been possible to physically inspect these accommodations with the workers not present, and then maybe to do interviews outside with the workers safely distanced outside? I'm just thinking that during the pandemic, there were all kinds of workers, healthcare workers, grocery store workers, that were still providing face-to-face service, and I just feel that you should have been able to inspect these facilities safely in person. So my concern is now, first of all, just a couple of questions. When will these temporary foreign workers be arriving? I would think very soon. Is that correct?
There are already some of them who are in Canada. So there's actually an annual cycle, as you know, of temporary foreign workers. For your questions on this issue, you have to remember that in 2020, when the pandemic arrived, it arrived quickly. Having already just the authority and be able to go and inspect for quarantine, this program was not a health program. It was not built to actually do inspections for quarantine. So while developing that, people were coming in. So there was no luxury of thinking in advance, is it better to do it or that? It was actually kind of reacting to a crisis and trying to manage it at the best we could.
I understand that. So in 2020, that was the thing. But then in 2021, you were still doing the virtual inspections, even though clearly they didn't work well in 2020 and did not protect the workers, and people died. So, so now I'm concerned, is that going to be the case this year? Because my big concern is, as we all know, COVID-19 now, what's in our communities, and it's widespread now. It's much more contagious. We're bringing these workers in at a time where there is a lot of it in the community, and I'm very, very concerned that, so maybe it would be helpful if someone could describe for us what these bunkies are like. How many people are in a typical dwelling building? How close are they together? Is there indoor plumbing? Just so that we know what we're bringing people into and how we can protect them safely. I'm not sure who can answer that for me.
And I'll need a short response, Mr. Tremblay.
Mary, you're shorter than me. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I'll be quick. The inspectors are not allowed to go on site until the workers have arrived in Canada. That is part of the authorities and the ways in which we can do this work. And so the pre-inspection or prior to arrival, that is conducted at the provincial jurisdictional level, called a housing inspection report, where they need to demonstrate that they have a pass on the housing inspection report by provincial authority, even before they apply for a labor market impact assessment, in order for the employer to receive an approval to have temporary foreign workers come into Canada. And so that housing inspection report looks at all of those things that you're speaking about the bunkers, water, access to functioning kitchens, etc. We must rely on our provincial authorities and who they delegate to demonstrate meeting those expectations.
Et merci beaucoup. Non, et merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. You have 2 minutes and 30 seconds, Sinclair. I would like to continue in my previous line of questioning, and I would like to ask ESDC and Mr. Tremblay in particular, how does the hierarchy work? I understand there was an internal audit, there are inspectors that need to be trained, but is there somebody that verifies the work of an inspector? Yes, as I was saying earlier, there is a committee and an organization that examines the work of the inspectors. And as I was saying, the things were developed as people were being put in place, and we added to our work after having heard the comments of the Auditor General. We have added to our audit service, and we continue to do audits within the department to ensure that we can do the follow-up and to ensure that the measures that were put in place are in fact implemented. Thank you. Thank you very much. This was not exactly my point, was when somebody does verify the work that's being done by the inspectors and the people that are doing that. When we look in 2020, the conclusions of the inspector's report said that almost and 100% and 99% in 2021 and 2020, they said that the quarantine conditions were compliant. Did that not really put up a red flag that something wasn't quite right? As I was saying earlier, we continued to put efforts into improving things from 2020. So we put in measures, and we've seen results improve. Things don't change overnight. We were in a situation of a crisis situation. Things could have been better. Everybody agrees. You have 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Well, so you say that things did improve between 2020 and 2021. 73% of quarantine conditions had problem, and the inspections were incomplete. And in 2021, it was 88% of inspections that were not properly done. I think that's a deterioration. 2020 goes right through to December, and we had results as of July 2021, and that's where we started to see things improve, July 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to first thank my colleagues from across this committee for ensuring that we have a serious and I think, questioned discussion about the seriousness of this. It's just so troubling. I think in my opinion, this is truly one of the greatest failures of our present time in this country, that we let folks die, and we take this position on the international stage as if we want to protect folks, and then we send back bodies. That's unacceptable. I don't want to see this committee face this issue again. And this report, I'd encourage the ministry to take seriously this work. And I want to just read a few facts that are concerning, and it's in the similar vein of my colleague Nathalie Sinclair de Gonnet, related to the red flags that I think the ministry should have certainly been aware of. In 2020 inspection, quarantine accommodations for 26 temporary foreign workers were being assessed. The only evidence collected to demonstrate that these 26 workers could physically distance as required was 2 photos of a table and photos of 2 bedrooms that showed the sleeping arrangements for only a small number of workers. This is supposed to be on behalf of 26. No follow-up occurred. The employer was found compliant. Why? In 2020 inspection, in a 2020 inspection, quarantine accommodations for 3 temporary workers were being assessed. The photos obtained from the employer clearly demonstrate that the distance between workers' beds and their shared bedroom was far less than the required 2 meters. No follow-up occurred again. The employer was found compliant. In a 2021 inspection that had been inactive for more than 2 months at the time of our review, quarantine accommodations for 10 workers were being assessed. Only 1 photo of one bedroom was obtained from the employer, information on the number of accommodations being used to quarantine these workers, and how these accommodations were allowed to require physical distancing was not collected. You can see this in Exhibit 13.6. Why are these employers getting compliancy approvals when it's very clear, especially after my colleague Valerie Bradford's comments related to these conditions and the issues related to photos, why were they found compliant?
First, I want to really thank you for these questions, and we share your concern. There's nothing more important than people's life, and people who come to Canada expect to be treated like other Canadians and other workers should be treated that way. And it is the failure that happened in these programs is something that clearly needs to be addressed. And I can tell you that it is a preoccupation for all the people who work on this program inside the department. Now I will turn to Mary, who may want to give you more specification about what happened in 2020.
And I'm going to ask you to be very, very brief, please. Very brief.
Of course, I'll concentrate on the supplemental training that we have already put in place to address those pieces. These are examples that we do not wish to replicate, and we're taking every effort not to do so.
Sorry, the question was, why were they approved compliant? Why were they approved compliant?
I'm actually going to have to cut it there. We're going to get back to you for another round, I'm afraid. Mr. Epp, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I come from a part of the country that has over 12,000 temporary foreign workers. We have a growing greenhouse industry and other sectors that are vital to our economy, and I have employers that are constantly building new housing. And I'm just following up on my colleague Mr. Duncan's questions, that they're really looking forward to those standards that they want to meet. The new stuff, they're guessing at what the future standards will be, so we're looking forward to the end of the year for those reports. I want to go back to the questions I asked earlier to ESDC, and there wasn't time for enough answer, regarding the coordination of inspection processes with the local authorities. In one of your answers most recently, you alluded to the fact that it's a provincial and local authority, and that happens before the workers come. So what is the coordination, particularly because those same organizations do post-outbreak audits? And I know growers were facing audit after audit, trying to comply, but it was one after another. So what's the coordination between ESDC, follow-up audits, and the local inspections?
We have agreements with most provinces, and we try to develop more agreements with the local authorities to make sure that we have a capacity to share information as it happened, live, basically, because that is, you're right, one of the issues that we need to address is making sure that there is actually not just a coordination, but a capacity when something happened, that the person who can act at that moment. So that's clearly an issue for us. And I will ask Mary maybe to complete on what is done on the compliance side to increase the work with local authorities.
Yes, we have introduced an escalation process that identifies the provincial touch points whenever there is an issue that needs escalation, where the health and safety of the TFW is of concern, and have done system enhancements and provided training to ensure that that is introduced as part of the ministerial commitments. On the ground, we work very closely with public health officials. They are, in fact, one of the first responders to an outbreak, as you were indicating. And we have established very strong relationships and governance tables across the country with provincial and local public health authorities.
Thank you.
So that we can work in lockstep with them.
My time is limited. I'm going to go back to the Auditor General now. That, for instance, in paragraph 1321, you found that conducting a number of inspections of compliance with respect to the regularly mandated requirements, the basic living conditions, that there wasn't sufficient documentation in the files. And so my question to the AG would be, are you inferring that the employers are not compliant, generally speaking, despite having this housing as a condition of program participation inspected by local authorities?
So it's a bit of a complex question to answer because it is the employer's responsibility to comply with basic housing requirements that are set either provincially or municipally. The temporary foreign worker program inspection regime is one that's supposed to ensure pre-pandemic and even in those post-quarantine inspections, whether or not the employer continues to meet those minimum standards. So the onus here that what we saw was that the inspectors were not gathering any evidence to demonstrate that they were still meeting those basic requirements. They weren't asking questions about standard living conditions, occupancy limits. In the absence of having evidence, you can't conclude that those questions were asked. And that's not a question of virtual or in person. That's a question of quality and rigor in an inspection.
Thank you. The point I'm making is that it's in the process of inspection far more from my experience than it is on the actual compliance on the ground. I'd like to go to 1330, where the Auditor General acknowledges that the department stated that the temporary foreign worker population in a pandemic situation were a vulnerable population. We know this. This has been a vulnerable population since 2017. It's been acknowledged, particularly in congregate living situations. Given the focus of all of us, that vaccines are a major tool in addressing COVID-19, did the Auditor General examine ESDC's policies on vaccination of temporary foreign workers as a condition of the program?
So in the scope of our audit did not look at vaccination policies. We looked at the changes to the immigration and refugee protection regulations. Now, any traveler coming into Canada had to comply with vaccination rules, and that would have been handled by another party, but it wasn't part of the inspection regime.
Thank you. So to ESDC, then, your workforce is subject to the federal vaccination mandate. Would it be fair to say that you would have the authority to make vaccination a condition of program participation? And then chose not to with the 2022 season?
I would ask Mary because I'm not sure I know the answer to this question. Sorry about that. Mary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The way I would answer this question is to say that the Order in Council governs the border in regards to who can come in and out of the country. Temporary foreign workers were identified as an exemption to mandatory vaccination, but there are specific rules for what needs to take place for unvaccinated workers to come into the country. Our department has been working with source countries to encourage and share education so that more and more vaccinated temporary foreign workers are coming into the country. And of course, there's value added in doing that for all concerned. And we are seeing that some early numbers that are coming in are more than 80% of temporary foreign workers in the agriculture, agri-food sector are fully vaccinated.
Thank you very much. MP Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
It's wonderful to see the Auditor General join us today, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming. This is a question for Mr. Forbes. In the OAG report, there was little assurance for Agri-Food Canada that all the funded employers met program terms and conditions. Did Agriculture Canada ever recover any funds from employers who did not adhere to the program guidelines?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. If I may, yes, we have. Over time, we use the public information that when the results of the work that ESDC and Immigration and Refugees Canada do. I think the numbers I have as of around this week are totaling about 12 cases where we've actually taken action, and that could be stopping an application, potentially stopping payment, or trying to recover funds if the funds had already been paid out at the time that we discovered the non-compliance.
Were there any monetary penalties? I seem to see that there are penalties ranging from $1,000 to $1 million. How many employers were fined in 2020 and 2021, and in what amount?
Mr. Chair, I think that question is we would recoup funding or delay or stop funding from our program. The penalties would be from ESDC. So I might turn to I think Mary, if it's possible, to respond to that question.
Deputy, with your support, I'll continue and indicate that, as I've shared earlier, over 330 employers were determined as non-compliant. The administrative monetary penalty equated to more than $2 million. The range of penalty could start out as a warning letter up into $100,000 per TFW, up to $1 million for each employer, depending on the size of the farm.
Thank you. going back to Mr. Forbes, how do you plan to use the results of ESDC's inspections to evaluate whether employers meet the program terms and conditions?
Thank you for the question. I mean, I think we would continue to work with ESDC when we understand of situations of non-compliance. In this or any other program, we obviously ensure that no inappropriate funds or funds were not delivered to recipients who were not eligible. We do ask that employers keep any records, participants in the program for, I think it's 6 or 7 years. So certainly if we find new information from work that's done by ESDC, we can always go back and revisit the situation with those that have received a payment and it turns out were in fact ineligible.
In the report, I was really concerned when I saw that the timelines were mismatched, in that often inspections were not able to be completed. And in fact, it was often the quarantine period had already gone by, and then the inspections were not able to go through. So I'm just thinking about the need to balance the completion of active inspections with the timeliness of completion of new inspections. How does the department intend to achieve this balance?
Yeah, no, you're right. It is essential to make sure that we have the capacity to deliver the inspections and the result of the inspections in time. What happened at the time was we doubled the numbers of inspection at the same time that we were changing from real to virtual inspections. What we've done since that time, we developed a workload strategy, a management plan that help us to prioritize, to make sure that we've got a good sense of what are the high priorities in terms of inspections. We have reduced the famous backlog that was there before the pandemic by 92%, and we have reduced by, I think it's close now to 50%, the existing load of the inspection. So it becomes way more manageable, and we will continue to make progress on that sense.
Could you just...
Time for statement.
Okay.
10, 15 seconds.
All right. Well, when is this national workload strategy going to be implemented?
The workload plan, management plan, was actually issued last summer, and we committed, I think, to send it to the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Ship. That was perfect. Turning now to the third round, MP Lawrence will begin this. MP Lawrence is appearing virtually today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just wanted to just get some context here in return, and just defining on how much is spent on the Foreign Temporary Workers Program. Any one of the civil servants are more than welcome to answer this. What is the total cost
Chair,
of the
point of
Foreign
order.
Temporary?
Yes, sir.
I'm very sorry to interrupt our colleague. Maybe it's just me, but I can hardly hear him.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else having difficulty?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll just suspend for a few seconds.
Can you guys hear me now? You. What was the total cost of the Foreign Temporary Worker Program in 2020, 2021, and forecast, if you can, for 2022? If you don't have the answer right on you, I'll take an undertaking to give this information to the committee.
I would ask Laurie if she's got the full amount of money. Otherwise, because that's, as you know, it also includes funding for other departments. So I'm not sure we're going to have all of this. Laurie?
Yes, we can table for sure the full funding breakdown, but I would just add that in budget 2021, we got $49.5 million over 3 years to support community-based organizations. And then we also got $54.9 million over 3 years, starting in 2021, 2022, to increase inspections of employers. And then, of course, we have our broader departmental budget that we can table along with these numbers.
Thank you. I would appreciate that because I mean, clearly this is an essential program, but I just do the math quickly, and if it's hundreds of millions of dollars at 70,000 employees, we're getting up to $3,000 or $4,000 employee that the taxpayer is responsible for, which is a significant amount of money. And so the next question I have is that we've heard that that our agriculture producers were held responsible, as they should be, for not following along with the regulations that were put in place by the government. But we haven't heard if there's been any discipline for the inspectors or the management, because it wasn't just one inspector; it was clearly most, if not all of them, when we've got failure rates at 80 or 90%. Were any civil servants, bureaucrats fined, disciplined, or demoted?
Most of the, and entirely, I would say, the issue that has been faced by the department during that crisis was a systemic one. It was a system that was not working well. It was the fact that we were doubling the numbers of inspections. We had to double the numbers of people. They had also to go on virtual, and the guides were developed at the last minute. So it's really hard to actually say it's this person who made the mistake when the person didn't get necessarily the training, and the person who developed the training didn't have the time to develop the training. So we have been like that over the last year. This is really a case.
With respect, sir, our producers had the same COVID, and they were held responsible, as they should be, for failures. You were tagged by the Auditor General halfway through the pandemic saying you have to do better. You did worse. Someone needs to be held responsible. Was anyone in your department, including yourself, paid a bonus during this time?
I don't have this information here, and I was not in the department during that time, so I can tell you that I was not paid during the bonus for this work. But the work that we've done, it's about addressing the situation, the accountability in the right way. And what we've done is actually redirect the team to focus their attentions on what was key and what we were learning through the crisis. And as you could see, and as we've said today, during the year 2021, people actually make the progress that they had to make. It's a failure in a context of a pandemic where things were under crisis, where people had to go outside of their zone of comfort, where people had to take risks that normally they would not take. It's not a situation where some employees decided not to do their job.
But clearly, sir, the Auditor General called for you to improve the verification of the audits that your inspectors were conducting. They got worse. In fact, we're not talking about a 20 or 30% problem. We're talking about an 80, 90% problem. Everyone realizes the challenges. We were all underneath COVID-19, but our agriculture producers were held to that standard and were fined. And you're telling me that not one civil servant would any type of responsibility whatsoever for the failures that are fully disclosed in this report that put our foreign temporary workers at risk?
I would, with all due respect, as I mentioned before, when the Auditor General advised the Department of Administration late 2020, actions were taken in 2021 from the get-go. Actions were taken, but it takes time to build up and to have results with actions. It doesn't happen in a day. But the fact that you have two proposals in budget really and ready, that means that people were working on this from the get-go. The fact that we put already in place some measures in February, the fact that we open up those lines, the fact that we work with the countries and consulates to make sure that informations were shared. It's all things that prove that the department was taking actions immediately. And when you look at the result after June,
sir, they weren't effective.
They were effective after June. The year 2021 is actually 12 months. And if you look at the result that we have with our internal audit after June, you see that there's progress. And if you look at the result today, for the month of February, we were at 95%.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. MP Fragas Gatos, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for appearing. I want to ask questions from a perspective of looking forward and what can be done to rectify some of the challenges that some of the problems that we've been talking about today. In December 2021, we know that Minister Qualtrough, the minister responsible for ESDC, obviously, issued instructions for you, Deputy Minister Tremblay, and I just want to go through each of those instructions and see where progress currently lies. Recognizing that, yes, December 2021 is only a few months ago, but still it would be good to get an update for the committee to have it on the record. So the first instruction is as follows: to ensure all staff responsible for inspections have received supplementary training by no later than March 2022. Where are we on that?
Done.
Okay.
They all received the training.
The second point, implement renewed guidance to ensure that if ever a worker's health and safety is at risk, necessary action is taken within 24 hours and no later than 48 hours, including the notification of appropriate stakeholders, authorities, and jurisdictions. Where are we there?
It's done. And that's what Mary mentioned, that we have now a system that allows for actions to be taken when we know that there's a risk or potential risk.
Fair enough. It's I'd like to make sure that it's on the record all in one spot. Point 3, develop a plan to target high-risk areas to reduce backlogs and ensure timely inspections. Where are we on that?
Done.
And finally, reach a rate of 80% of inspection files without substantive errors by March 2022 and reach 90% by no later than September 2022. Where are we?
We are above 80%. As I mentioned in February, we were at potentially 95%. We hope that it's going to continue, and we're on track for sure to get the 90% by September.
Thank you very much for that. I want to delve in and understand the relations between ESDC on the one hand and other levels of government, because clearly other levels of government have jurisdiction here, have a stake here. And can you tell me where we are on that as far as the way forward?
We have agreements, as I mentioned, with a lot of provinces, and we will continue to do that. We also have engaged with people, including provinces, on the issue of accommodations. I think we all share the same objective to make sure that it is done appropriately. The issue that we have continued to be is how do we coordinate and make sure that we have actions taken in real time. And this is something that we're working on, and we expect and we hope that by the end of this year, we will have a plan to implement on that side.
I have 2 minutes, I'm told. Obviously, when we look back at the pandemic, well, look back, we're still in the pandemic, but especially during the peaks of the pandemic, ESDC is one of those departments, we can look at CRA as well, extremely busy, extremely occupied with helping Canadians. And that obviously presented a great deal of, the workload was very heavy. The focus was on the pandemic and offering supports and ensuring supports for Canadians. One might pivot from there to ask a question related to where the focus on temporary foreign workers is, considering the fact that ESDC has placed so much attention on ensuring Canadians are supported through the pandemic. As far as being able to deal with this issue of temporary foreign workers, is there a greater space available now in terms of not a reduced workload, but things are not as grave as they were in the early waves of the pandemic? Is there greater space now for this issue to be dealt with within the department and for it to be given the attention that it deserves?
All those issues were important. I was not in the department at the time, but I look at the files. You're right. This is a department that has been working on benefits night and days during the pandemic. The temporary foreign workers was an important problem and an important issues to address. We have increased the resources significantly to make sure that we were able to tackle some of those issues, and we will continue to give a significant importance to actually the program, because we want this program to be successful. We want both us, the employers, the Canadians, to benefit from this, but also the workers that are coming here to actually enjoy and have a positive outcomes of their stay in Canada.
Thank you very much. Brief comment.
Well, a brief comment.
Very brief.
I'll simply say that, yes, we have seen a challenge here, but it's good to know and heartening to know that steps are being taken to address the matter. And through the pandemic, ESDC was there. You continue to be there, and we will see the progress that's made on this issue. I'm sure this committee will revisit the matter in the coming months.
Thank you. Maintenant, la députée Sinclair Desgagnés.
Now we have a member, Sinclair Desjardins. I would like to talk about inspections when there were outbreaks, different elements of the report. Tell us at the beginning of the pandemic, the report tells us that inspections were few and far between in terms of quarantine measures. And as the pandemic advanced, knowledge improved and the provinces communicated information more quickly. Why did it take so long to do inspections when there were outbreaks? As I was saying earlier, it's not that we took time, it's that the volume doubled during that period. And even if we did hire more inspectors and train them as quickly as possible, we also had employees who were leaving. That was why we weren't able to keep up to the demand at that time during outbreaks. And that's why we have set up strategic management of those inspections, and we've reinforced the implementation. And we also have a sufficient number of inspectors. We have been able to lessen the inventory of inspections to be done. Can you give us numbers, Mr. Tremblay? Yes. We had more than 3,000 inspections before the pandemic. We've reduced the backlog by 92%. And during the pandemic, I think we've have 50% increase.
As-tu des commentaires? Do you have anything to add? Crescenzi?
I'm sorry, my system was freezing there. I think our deputies has covered it well. We have introduced also system enhancement.
Juste une question sur les. Excusez-moi d'interrompre.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a question on the numbers, the precise numbers, with respect to the number of inspections that are being done right now, just numbers. When there's outbreak and quarantine in the accommodation for the temporary foreign workers.
3,000 inspections by the end of this fiscal, by last March 24th. Of those, we have 1,500 in primary agriculture, where there is likely accommodation component, as many of the accommodation inspections include an accommodation component. Under quarantine, 65% of those are quarantine inspections. And then outbreak inspections are those where there's an outbreak notified, and we are working with the province in order to look at compliance. And about 104 have been completed to date.
Et merci beaucoup tous les deux.
Thank you very much to both of you.
And I want to thank the witnesses again. I'm not certain if we'll get another round, but thanks for being here. I think it's an important first step to make sure that there's accountability for this work. I hate to see the Auditor General's report in some years from now repeat these mistakes. I am very worried because of the fact that this ministry has been told before by the Office of the Auditor General to do better, and we've seen things get worse. So you have to understand our concern with how the implementation of this is going to go. And so a commitment is one thing, but there's much more work that has to be done. And I do think that there was a mention by Deputy Minister Tremblay regarding the structure itself, the structure being a massive problem. And of course, it's very difficult for any administrator to look at this structure and try to use this vehicle when the vehicle itself is set to a destination that isn't going to work for anybody. Part of this work, and I understand that part, but part of the OAG's report is, I mentioned this in the past about OAG reports, is it often lacks the ability to have more nuanced review of these audits. And part of that is to understand some of the structures that you're talking about, Deputy Minister Tremblay. And I'd like to see if you could elaborate on some of the structural problems, but in particular the structural racism that exists within a program like this when we're talking about temporary foreign workers. It's not uncommon. I've spoken to temporary foreign workers, their experience with racism, and the fact that the Auditor General's report is, there's nothing here about it, and I've pointed that out in previous Auditor General's reports. Would you agree that there is issues, not just with the structure, but structural racism within the department?
there's systemic racism in the public service at different levels. I think I will never deny that. I've been working on Indigenous issues, as probably you know, for years. And it is a preoccupation for the senior management table. It is something that we have seen also on diversity and inclusion as a very, very avant-gardist department, and we will continue to work on this. It is a very important issue. Is there some bias that happen with foreign workers? It's a very legitimate question that, of course, we take very seriously. On your point on the commitment, we're not just making commitment, we're actually coming with facts. We're coming with actions. And
to that point, Mr. Tremblay, what action will you take in order to combat structural racism?
I'm going to actually stop there, but you will have another round to come back to this. Mr. Duncan, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, maybe perhaps want to get the Auditor General just to have an opportunity to respond. In the previous rounds, Mr. Tremblay has said that the internal audits perhaps paint a bit of a different picture than your conclusion in your report. And on page 8, to the Attorney, or to the Auditor General rather, you said, we find that the quality of the department's quarantine inspections worsened during spring and summer 2021. The department is saying, as a matter of fact, that they believe that their internal audits, they got better, they stabilized. Could we just kind of get maybe you on record of your view on that conclusion they've drawn, please?
If I understood Mr. Tremblay's comments correctly, I think he mentioned that his internal audit work post the end of our audit period, which was in June of 2021, has demonstrated that there was some improvement. I do know that during our audit, we did look at some of the internal audits that had occurred, and we found that those internal audits had identified similar issues with quality of evidence, just as we had found, yet there was no improvement in any of the inspection files that we reviewed. So it leads you to believe that the oversight mechanisms, while there, were still somewhat ineffective at influencing change.
I appreciate that, and that's helpful. Thank you. One of the other things, Ms. Hogan, is about, and this was mentioned, I believe, in Ms. Bradford's thing, which I've raised my eyebrows, and I want to elaborate on it a bit further. You'd mentioned somebody had mentioned there's a rule that inspectors can't pre-inspect a workplace or accommodations until temporary foreign workers have arrived. One of the things, and Mr. Epp had raised this in his initial round, which I find is interesting, you have a role to oversight of the federal government. I understand your scope and your jurisdiction, you got a lot on your plate, but one of the things about this file is that, and this goes back to the housing standard by province, there's all three levels of government involved to a certain extent on the temporary foreign workers program and their protections. Ms. Hogan, do you look at, it's not your jurisdiction to audit, obviously, provincial or municipal, but talking about the flow or efficacy of these programs and oversights, are you concerned in any way that there's multiple layers and it's confusing for employers, or we talk about explaining the rights for temporary foreign workers and, oh, well, housing is provincial and getting here is Canadian and then locally. Are you concerned at all at that level in terms of the efficiency? Can you weigh in that a little bit?
Well, that's an area I think that we've been looking at very closely lately, the coordination between jurisdictional issues between provinces, territories, and the federal government. We didn't look at it targeted in this audit when we looked at temporary foreign workers, but it does come up about who sets standards, who has enforcement power, who has regulations. When I sit back and I look at all of this throughout the whole pandemic, and I've said it on many occasions as I've tabled pandemic reports, there is a need for a better coordination across jurisdiction. If the country can't come together in an emergency, we will struggle. So it's the time between crises where we need to work at fixing about how to share health information better across the country, how to coordinate jurisdictional issues like this when it comes to the health and safety of any person who visits Canada or any Canadian. So I do think it's long past due that the issue of temporary foreign workers get addressed, but I do think it's an even broader issue when it comes to better coordination within the federal government and within other layers of government across the country.
I appreciate that. And looking with about 1 minute left, I agree on that. I'm cautious of the centralization of powers in Ottawa at the federal government for sure. But I do think, and I'll go back to my example in my previous round of questioning about accommodations for temporary foreign workers. On a national program, somebody arriving and going through an immigration process through ESDC, Agri-Food Canada on a national level, I don't understand how there couldn't be an agreement on that. And I go back perhaps and maybe get your comment on this about it's been 4 years now of trying to negotiate, have conversations, discussions, and I'd say to Mr. Trombley, half sarcastically here, I'd send an email around all your provincial partners and say, we're going to establish a minimum standards next week. If anybody has a problem with running water and electricity being a minimum standard, please let me know by Friday. I mean, in all honesty, this speaks a little bit about the challenge we've got of cross-jurisdictional and somebody to come in with, I hate to say an iron fist, but come in and say, no, we need to make a decision. Here's a deadline, and here's what the answer is. Ms. Hogan, in my summary here, I think
that was an excellent statement.
We will follow
Thank you very
up.
much. Mr. Dong, you have the floor for 5 minutes, and you're joining us virtually as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a bit of preamble. Before I go into my questions, I just want to say to the Deputy that I want to express my empathy to you, your department, and all the public service during this very difficult, past 2 years. I know some of the questions has been, pretty blunt and hard today, but it's with the best intentions. I think, I completely understand. Like public service, they're human beings too. Inspectors are human beings too. In the beginning of the COVID, none of us knew how severe it is and how to deal with it. It was all we knew was it was dangerous, and it spread pretty fast. So, but at the same time, Canada has to function as a country. Government has the most important role to lead, to provide that sense of security, and I say security that includes food security as well. That's why, I think in previous reports, even including the SERB report, the Auditor General wasn't as critical as this one. And I think that some of it has to do with understanding the circumstances that you guys have to work under. A lot of operations being done from home and extended hours, and so I just want to put that on the record. The second thing is that actually, Canada is a country known to have very good rules and laws and detailed regulations, thanks to the hard work of politicians and legislators previously, and also, but it's carried out by our public service. But I think COVID actually present a rare opportunity for us to look at some of ways to be more nimble and result-based in our future practice. So all today's questions and later on the report recommendation is taking us to a higher level so we can be ready for any future crisis as big as COVID, I think. So I know it's a bit out of scope. I keep hearing the numbers, 73% increase to 88% later during COVID. I know this question may be out of scope of this report, but give us some sense of what percentage pre-COVID under normal such circumstances from your previous inspection practices. Do you have that number?
I would turn to Mary because that would also be not, of course, the inspections for quarantine, but more the usual one.
Thank you so much for the question. And pre-COVID, we did have a quality assurance program that looked at the quality of our inspections. I don't have that figure in front of me. I'll see if I can find it before the end of our period here today, or can table it with you at a later time.
Please do, because to me that's important. It's to have the background number, to know that the system, how bad the system, how good the system was before, and then to me they're like two sets of practice. One is doing normal times, and one is doing emergency times. And because we can't be in the emergency mode for forever, because that certainly will be will draw a lot of resource, and I think we should have two levels of response when it comes to inspection. My second question is to the Auditor General. In your findings, I know it looks very bad, and myself included are quite concerned about this. But in your findings, was there any obvious difference between province to province? Like some provinces were done better, and some provinces was very bad. Was there any finding about that?
When we did start to see the results, and they are quite negative, when you start to hit over 75%, 80% where you see issues, we did start to look whether or not we could disaggregate the information that we had to see if there were any trends by inspector, by employer, by location. And unfortunately, we didn't see a trend. It was systemic. It was everywhere that we looked at, everything that we inspected or that we reviewed. So I know that the majority of inspections that were completed, that we're able to review, were at in 3 particular provinces, I do believe, but not one set off a flag more than the other. It was really just systemic across the entire inspection regime process.
Thank you very much, and that is time. We're now moving into our fourth and last round. MP Epp, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Give me a minute here. To the Auditor General, you recommend in the development of federal programs, departments are expected to factor in and respond to systemic inequality considerations using a gender-based analysis plus lens. And so I'm sorry, then, so to the department, I'm assuming that you will comply with this United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 8 in the implementation in your actions. Can you provide this committee an overview of what that means for the Temporary Foreign Worker Program?
Yeah, I can turn to Brian, but before I mention it, just a few points for you that would help on this, I think. First of all, we do that through education. So it means that we have to, all those sessions that we have with employers, for example, is a good example of making sure that people understand the rights that those workers have when they come to Canada. If you look at the regulation that we're working on, those regulations precisely mention items, making sure that actually temporary fine workers are told about the rights that they have, making sure that the employers are prohibited to use reprisal against the employers. We also work with those organizations that I mentioned before, making sure that we have community organizations that work with the offer what we call the wraparound services to make sure that actually the workers have people to talk to and they have resources if they feel that they are not treated appropriately. And that's also one of the objectives of our tip lines. So those are the kind of measures from a GBA plus and anti-racism perspective that you try to integrate in your program as much as possible in order to avoid those situations. But I can turn to Brian to provide more information on GBA plus in the context of TEFW.
Thank you. I actually wanted to get to another section here yet. The beginning of the pandemic, back in March 22, our riding, as I mentioned earlier, is over 12,000 temporary foreign workers. And what we found so much a challenge, and it's come up, and Ms. Hogan, you commented on this dynamic with this program a few minutes ago. You know, I ended up chairing some meetings locally between all 3 levels of government. When COVID entered into the bunkhouses, we were all in uncharted territory. What we also found is a great deal of trouble with, and you know, the estimates locally are that we have between 2,000 and 3,000 undocumented workers in our region as well. And so that brings in, you know, the federal CBSA, that brings in Provincial Department of Labor, and all of those situations. I'm going to ask, I'm assuming this is outside the scope of the audit, but did you run into any situations where, you know, often we'll find in the press, you know, we've seen those disturbing images of housing situations. Quite often those are traced back into labor contractors. They're traced back to situations that are not under the jurisdiction of this program. In the audit, and I'll start with the auditor first. Did you run into any such situations?
No, we did not. As I said, our review was limited to looking at the inspection files and the implementation of the immigration and refugee protection regulations around COVID. And so we didn't extend that far. Now, I do want to give you some assurance that if we had seen something that we felt was not appropriate, we would have followed up and inspected on that. But within the work that we did not see any issues, as you mentioned.
So I'll extend that question to ESDC. As you're administering the program, have you run into such similar situations?
Mary?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would say that to answer this question, we have run across undocumented workers, unfortunately. We do not have, you are rightly so in saying that this is not part of our mandate. We immediately contact the enforcement officials that are required to follow up in those sets of circumstances. And of course, we would be looking at the credibility of this employer moving forward with our program and completing the inspection against all of the conditions that are associated to this type of activity.
So further to your statement there, you would contact the appropriate authorities. So who is that? Is that CBSA? Because now we're also crossing over into provincial labor jurisdiction. So do you have a mechanism, a coordinated mechanism to the provincial proper authority?
Yes, you are right. CBSA is one of the enforcement officials that we would be working with, but also through our escalation process in these types of situations, we would be escalating across to our provincial counterparts immediately on this. Oftentimes, they are also the ones that are first alerting us of a situation as well, having built those relationships on the ground.
I'm afraid that's your time, Mr. Epp. I'm turning now to Madame Shanahan. And just a point, in your first exchange, there was talk of provincial numbers. Did you want the department to present numbers province by province? It was a little unclear, so I thought I'd ask you about that.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, that would be very helpful because I was looking at the online website that looks at the non-compliant employers. Very interesting, but of course it's employer, by employer. So it would be nice to have some aggregate numbers, disaggregate aggregate numbers.
Mr. Tremblay, could that information be provided province by province? As in after this hearing, thank you.
We will provide disaggregate aggregate information.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. On est vraiment dans les statistiques parce que l'autre.
Thank you very much. We're really in the statistics here because what I noticed, there were 24 reasons for an employer to not be compliant. So they may have missed putting in a document, or there may be inadmissible. There could be, so it would be good to have an idea table on that, because it's not just a question of health for these inspections. It's there's all the documentation and the analysis of the working situation. 10, 15 years ago, that was the priority for the program. So my question right now is for Mr. Forbes, from the Agricultural Department. Mr. Forbes, are you in regular contact with the organizations that represent agricultural employers and also associations for migrant workers and recruitment agencies also for employees? Do you have a good understanding of that labor market? Thank you for the question. For us, we do have relationships with employers and employer organization, and with foreign groups, worker groups. As Mr. Tremblay was saying, it's more ESDC that deals with that. And what do you understand with respect to employers? Everyone wants to have a workplace that's going to be safe. Nobody wants to be with people that are sick. And so I'd like to know, what do the associations of employers say to this? Thank you for the question. First, I think as was said earlier, there's a labor shortage, and So we, of course, do need these workers, these temporary foreign workers in the agricultural sector. So we do start with a basic need. So I think that really, in terms of the number of employers, they're really very pleased to be able to provide a safe environment. It's a priority for them because a lot of those temporary foreign workers are people that come back every year, so there are relationships that go on for years. And they have quite close relationships with between the employees and the employers. And a lot of them have really supported the efforts to have a health and safety workplace. A safe workplace. That's interesting because we can talk about an approach where we have employers who are trusted. Are you able to provide, say, to ESDC profiles, if you will, some kind of assurance that there are employers, that trusted employers, how could I put this, where we could concentrate on where the problematic employers as well, and not put so much of a burden on employers who are doing a good job and providing a safe environment. And thank you for the question. The policy for the program is the responsibility of Mr. Tremblay and his team, but we're always in contact. Is it you, Mr. Forbes? Do you think that to have a one-stop well, I would say what we could do to improve, to ensure that the service would be improved, and maybe for producers this could be helped, but I think it would be important to work very closely with the colleagues here today to ensure that we're able to offer a good service to the agricultural clients. Well, I'm so sorry. Things are moving ahead today here. Member Sinclair Desgagnés, you have it's your turn. I would like to hear Madame Hogan when she was describing problems of the jurisdictions, when she was responding to one of your questions with respect to coordination between the different levels of government and the different departments that are involved in these issues. Can you briefly give us an idea of what the issues are exactly? Well, I think that it's always complicated when there are many levels of government that are involved in the management of a program for Canadians, and that's what we see here. Standards are established by municipal and provincial governments. There's not really a national standard when it comes to improving accommodation conditions. For example, if we were to have a federal program where there was surveillance on these conditions, that would be something where we might see an improvement in terms of the requirements for becoming a member of the program, as well as for the respecting of the standard that are needed for each province. That could help. That's excellent. If you discuss with the agricultural people that contacted us, they said that it was difficult to provide to get temporary foreign workers because of delays and because of the fact that there were huge problems to get these foreign temporary workers, that there were a lot of delays, and that there was trouble with accommodation, with pay. And so these temporary foreign workers, this is a subject that seems to be problematic at almost every level. So I do agree with the idea that a one-stop shopping would be the best thing here, and we could be able to bring these responsibilities under one heading, and that's what we'd like to see in Quebec. So I'll finish with that. Thank you very much. And Member Desjardins, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, that's correct. I did mention in previous, so just a reminder, I'd actually like the Auditor General to respond to that question more directly. I'm more satisfied with Deputy Minister Tremblay's statement related to his recognition of structural racism within the ministry and his commitment to do that. I'll return to him, but I'm just surprised that our audits just don't include very much information related to a gender-based analysis or diversity and inclusion analysis. Would the Auditor General like to explain why, with the topic of racism and diversity and inclusion is not present in this report, even though the Deputy Minister himself has recognized this, and the government as a whole?
I do agree with you that the government as a whole, the Prime Minister himself acknowledged that systemic racism exists in the federal public service, and it exists in Canada. And the issues that we saw were really one that was a systemic problem across the organization that allowed our findings to happen. All of our audits have started, and this was one of the first few to start to look at gender-based analysis and diversity and inclusion, and really start to hold departments to account for the actions and the commitments that have been made for many years now in order to improve how programs are delivered, how they're designed, and to ensure that no one's left behind. And so hopefully you'll start to see that this is much more prevalent in our audits. But again, there's only so much to do when there is nothing to audit. And so
my time is quite limited. So just to be clear, there isn't a diversity and inclusion analysis to identify structural racism within this report. Yes or no?
No, there is not.
Thank you very much. And to the Deputy Minister, can you describe what plans you have to ensure that we can understand how racism plays a role in the structures through this department, and what assurances you can give Canadians that this is truly recognized, and what plans you have in place to make sure we prevent further structural racism from continuing?
We have actually inside the department groups that represent visible minorities. We integrate GBA systematically, GBA plus, in all our policy analysis, in policy development and policy implementation. As you know, we do have a recruitment. We look at our numbers and how we perform on EE numbers, making sure that actually we meet the standards and exceed the standards, and also looking at all levels of the hierarchy, because as you know, sometimes we're good at recruiting people at the bottom, but we have difficulties to promote them. So this is something also we tackle. We provide training, we provide leadership course, we go and look at the numbers and say, what can we do to actually improve the situation? And I'm pleased to say that actually we've got numbers that are higher than what the labor availability is telling us, but that's not enough. We will continue on that track. The most important thing I would add, and you know that more than me, it's changing the culture. And that's something that takes more time, but it takes a dedicated effort from everybody in the department.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very, very much. I want to thank all of our witnesses for appearing today. We covered a lot of questions, and I do appreciate your responses and working with this committee to explore this. Just 1 second, Mr. Duncan. On Tuesday, we will be meeting on Report 15, Enforcement of Quarantine and COVID-19 Testing Orders, Public Health Agency of Canada. Mr. Duncan, if you have something to say, just keep it brief, please.
I would just say briefly, I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. I have several more questions. I just want to flag to the leadership of the committee that perhaps in our committee business of subsequent meetings that we could perhaps consider this. I know through our list, I know Mr. Epp has a few more as well on that, so just flagging it was helpful today, but I know I've got a few more, and there's a lot to go through in this report, so just wanted to leave it at that, not an official notice or anything.
Okay, we'll consider that at a future
meeting. Well, the witnesses are here, we might come back and ask. I thought it would be fair to say that now.
That is not an official invitation.
Yeah, not exactly.
We will consider this. With your consent, I will adjourn the meeting. Again, thank you, the witness today. Seeing no objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.